In today's story, we're about to witness a harrowing true event where 3 pilots crash land straight into the ocean. Following this massive crash, they might have survived the impact, but how will they survive in this vast ocean? Let's dive into this breathtaking true story. The story begins back in 1942, where we see about 2,000 American Navy troops in the Pacific Ocean preparing for an attack on Japan. As part of this mission, a squad of American fighter planes set off straight towards Japan. Leading one of these fighter planes was Chief Harold Dixon, who was an experienced Navy pilot. With him were 2 other soldiers, radio man Tony Pastula and bombardier Gene Aldrich. Their plane was tearing through the wind, cutting across the heart of the vast Pacific Ocean. Right then, Aldrich noticed that all the signals on the radar had vanished. He immediately informed Harold, who was in the pilot's seat, about this issue, but there was no response from his end. However, when Pastula knocked twice on the back of Harold's seat, Harold spoke up, saying, "Don't worry guys, the signal is gone, but now we have to fly by, calculating the wind speed and the ocean waves." Hearing Harold's words, Pastula checked his reading device and told Harold that according to the waves, the correct direction was east. Upon knowing this, Harold turned the plane towards the east. A short while later, Harold's eyes went back to the indicator. He saw that the plane's fuel was nearly exhausted. The aircraft could crash at any moment, so he immediately told his companions, "Boys, get ready. Before the fuel runs out, we have to make an emergency water landing. Quickly gather all the necessary items in one place." Harold didn't waste a second and brought the plane down into the ocean. The 3 of them barely managed to escape the sinking aircraft. Harold had kept a rubber raft with him that could be inflated to look like a boat. In this terrifying ocean, this single raft was the only thing that could save their lives. So, Harold immediately pulled out the raft's bag. As air filled it, the bag swelled up and took the shape of a raft. Now, it could be used as a boat. But before they could climb inside, the massive ocean waves flipped the raft over. After a lot of struggle, the 3 of them finally managed to flip the raft straight and climb onto it. Space inside the raft was actually quite tight for 3 people, so the 3 of them somehow curled up and lay down right there. During their conversation, Harold assured them, "The rescue team will come to save us by morning, so don't any of you worry." The next morning, after waking up, Harold, Pastula, and Aldrich waited for the rescue team with high hopes. After waiting for a long time, they still saw no glimmer of them coming. Just then, suddenly, Aldrich spotted a rescue team plane in the distant sky. Harold identified it as a Navy rescue plane, saying, "It must be looking for us." Harold said, "We have to signal to them that we are right here, otherwise they'll leave. Pastula, Aldrich, hurry up. Use the parachute and flares to grab the rescue team's attention." But Aldrich and Pastula informed him that yesterday, while escaping the fighter plane, those items had been left inside the aircraft. Now, they actually had nothing with them to signal their presence to the pilots. So, they kept shouting and screaming for a long time, but the rescue plane disappeared from their sight. The plane was gone now. Seeing this, all hope for the 3 of them was completely washed away. Frustrated, they sat there on the raft. Seeing this, Aldrich suggested, "Maybe they saw us and went to get help." Hearing this, Harold replied, "No, they didn't see us, and they won't come back either, because during war, a rescue plane never returns to the same spot twice. They had neither any necessary equipment nor any food. They were completely trapped in the middle of the vast ocean. No one would come to save them from here." Seeing such a situation, Harold told Aldrich and Pastula, "We are standing in the face of death, so now we have to take every step very carefully. If we want to survive, you 2 must obey the orders I give." Both of them agreed to Harold's words. Harold spoke again. "All right, let's see what we have. Take out everything you have and put it on my shirt." Pastula and Aldrich had a gun, a knife, some rope, and a few other items. Pastula also found a water bag. Seeing this, everyone's faces lit up, but they discovered that there wasn't actually a single drop of water in it. After looking at all the items, Harold said, "We need to keep the weight on this raft low, so we should throw our shoes into the ocean." Hearing this, Aldrich and Pastula threw their shoes into the water, but Harold didn't throw his shoes away. Before they could ask anything, Harold said, "Maybe one of us should keep our shoes, because if we somehow make it to shore, we'll at least have one pair of shoes to walk in." So, as night fell, the 3 of them decided that they would take turns staying awake to keep an eye on the ocean, so that if any ship or distress signal was spotted, they wouldn't miss it a second time. So now Aldrich stayed awake to keep watch. Then Harold took over the surveillance duty. But even after sitting for hours on end, they saw nothing but the calm waves of the ocean. The next morning, after Harold, it was Pastula's turn on watch. His eyes hadn't caught anything either so far. Now Pastula asked Harold, "Chief, where is our position now?" Harold informed him, "We are currently about 1,900 miles from Hawaii, 1,000 miles from Samoa, and about 6,000 miles from South America." Then he pulled a thread from his shirt and held it up in the wind, trying to gauge the wind's speed. Harold further stated that the ocean wind was blowing at 22 kilometers per hour, which could help a flat-bottomed raft move forward quickly. Their only worry was that their raft shouldn't drift into Japanese territorial waters, because if they went there, surviving would be pointless, as the Japanese would ultimately kill them anyway. By now, they were starting to get very hungry again. But along with many other things, all the food had been left behind in the fighter plane. If they didn't find food or water very soon, their chances of survival would drop significantly. Just then, it occurred to Aldrich, "So, what if we don't have food? There are plenty of fish in the ocean. If we can somehow catch fish, our food problem will be solved." Harold agreed with him, saying, "Your idea is good, but we don't have a fishing rod. We can check our bag once. We kept some things for emergencies. Maybe we'll find something in there that we can use to rig up a way to catch fish." Then, when Aldrich checked the bag, he found a rope inside. Additionally, Pastula had 2 magazines for his gun. He took the spring out of one of the magazines and fashioned it into something like a fishing hook. Then he tied that hook to the rope, turning it into a makeshift fishing rod. And for bait, he tore off a small piece of his handkerchief and stuck it onto the hook. Now, this hook was working just like a fishing rod. So now, Aldrich cast the hook into the water, and after waiting a few moments, there was a violent tug on the rope. Aldrich happily said, "Looks like a fish is hooked." He started pulling the rope towards himself. But even after using all his strength, he couldn't pull the fish up. Perhaps, instead of a fish, something else was on his hook, something stronger than Aldrich. As Aldrich pulled harder, his rope snapped, and he fell backward with a thud. When Aldrich and Pastula peered into the water, they saw nothing there. Aldrich said only one thing: "It seems whoever was down there was hungrier than us." By then, the sun had risen directly overhead. The scorching sun and hunger had completely exhausted the 3 of them. Harold and Pastula had put their t-shirts over their heads to get even a little protection from the sun. Meanwhile, Aldrich quietly kept the fishing line in the water, waiting in hopes of a fish. Amidst this, Pastula smiled wryly and said, "I thought I was doing something worthy of a medal, but dying of hunger sitting on a raft isn't exactly an act of bravery." In reply, Harold laughed and said, "Forget the medal. Pray to the Almighty that we don't have to pay for the fighter plane once we get back." So, 5 more days passed like this, and so far, they hadn't eaten or drunk anything. Suddenly, Harold remembered that he had a pencil in his pocket. He quickly pulled out the pencil and started making some marks on his life jacket. Aldrich and Pastula watched him in amazement. Harold quietly began drawing a map on the life jacket. Aldrich and Pastula saw that Harold was drawing a map on this life jacket. A few moments later, he showed that map to Aldrich and Pastula. Pointing to a dot on the map, Harold said, "Look, right now, we are stuck here." Harold pointed towards the front of the map and said, "There are some small islands in this area which are closest to us. If our raft continues at this speed, maybe we can reach those small islands. Maybe we'll find some help after reaching those islands." Hearing this, Pastula panicked and said, "If the wind changes direction, we'll never make it there." Harold thought for a moment and said, "This map will only be useful if we can control the raft against the wind's reverse flow." Harold immediately ordered Aldrich to untie the rope attached to the raft. Then, looking at Pastula, he told him to make a frame using the wire lying in the bag so that the raft wouldn't buckle in the water. Both of them started working according to Harold's orders. They tied one end of the rope tightly to the raft, and they attached the other end to the wire frame Pastula had made and threw it into the water. That frame was now acting like a sea anchor for them. Actually, if the ocean wind started blowing in the opposite direction, it could turn the raft along with it. In such a situation, this makeshift anchor would work to keep their raft steady. Then, when the wind started blowing in the right direction, they would pull up the anchor so the raft could move forward with the wind. So, after a while, the wind started blowing in the right direction, and Aldrich and Pastula pulled that sea anchor out of the ocean. Harold told them, "For now, the wind is moving in the right direction. Just a little rain would solve our drinking water problem. We can't drink this salty ocean water." In such a state, all glimmers of hope in the middle of that endless ocean had become blurred. Exhausted, they began to beg the Almighty for just a little rain. Without water, their survival had become nearly impossible. That night, Aldrich and Pastula fell into a deep sleep. Harold was on watch at that time, and just then, suddenly heavy rain began. Because of this, Aldrich and Pastula also woke up. Seeing this torrential rain, the three of them literally danced with joy. Perhaps the Almighty had heard their call. Then, they collected rainwater in whatever they had at hand, like shoes, hats, and water bags. The next day, Aldrich once again cast the hook into the water, waiting in hope of a fish. But so far, he had caught nothing. His patience was starting to wear thin, and he realized that no fish would actually be caught with this fishing rod. He had to find another way to satisfy the hunger pangs. Thinking this, he pulled his knife out of his pocket. Seeing Aldrich do this, Harold became alert. He said in a stern voice, "Put the knife away, Aldrich, or you'll puncture the raft." But Aldrich, driven mad by hunger, could only see fish and meat before his eyes. He didn't listen to a word Harold said, and he kept stabbing the water continuously with the knife. Suddenly, his knife got stuck in something. Aldrich panicked completely, because he thought he had accidentally stabbed their raft. He looked at Harold and said, "Chief, my knife is stuck in something hard. I think I've punctured our raft." Hearing this, it was as if the sky had fallen on Harold's head. He advised Aldrich not to pull out the knife. But just then, Aldrich realized that the thing his knife was stuck in was actually moving. In an instant, he understood that it must be a live animal, or fish. So he immediately yanked his hand back into the raft, causing the thing to land straight on top of the sleeping Pastula. And this thing was nothing else but a baby shark. Pastula woke up with a start, terrified, and without thinking, he grabbed hold of the shark. Harold himself held the shark down tight, and without wasting a moment, Aldrich used all his strength to strike the shark with the knife one blow after another. Within seconds, the shark died from the knife wounds. And when Aldrich slid open the shark's belly, many small fish came out from inside, which the shark had eaten. Then the three of them started eating those fish raw, just like animals. Harold stuffed some pieces of meat into his socks so that if they got hungry in the next few days, they could manage with those. Due to dissecting the shark, blood had spread inside the raft by then. Aldrich and Pastula cleaned up the raft together, and whatever blood there was, they threw back into the ocean. But while doing this, Aldrich saw that dozens of sharks had gathered around their raft and were circling them. Terrified, he warned Harold and Pastula. Harold informed them, "The smell of the blood spreading in the water has drawn the sharks to us, because sharks can detect the scent of blood from miles away. They want to hunt us now, so from now on, we have to be very careful." Out of fear of the sharks, the three of them sat quietly inside the raft. Now, in the dead of night, Harold was keeping a sharp watch over the ocean while alert, as Pastula and Aldrich slept. Suddenly, Aldrich woke up. He started washing his face with ocean water, but just then, an agonizing scream escaped his lips. Actually, a shark had been lurking beneath the raft, and seizing the opportunity, it had bitten down on Aldrich's hand. Aldrich managed to free his hand using all his strength, but by then, his hand had been badly mauled. Hearing his scream, Pastula panicked and, without thinking, started firing wildly into the ocean. Harold immediately shouted, "Stop, Pastula! Cut it out!" Harold saw that the shark attack had caused a deep wound on Aldrich's hand, so without delay, he tied a handkerchief very tightly over the wound to stop the bleeding. Days passed like this, in starvation and waiting for help. But so far, no help had arrived, nor had they seen any shore. Weakened by the lack of food and water, they began to suffer from hallucinations. 15 more days passed in this manner. Pastula sat staring intently at his gun. Seeing this, Aldrich got scared, because he thought Pastula might shoot himself, or even them. So, he kept asking Pastula for the gun. Pastula understood Aldrich's fear, so handing over the gun to Aldrich, he said in a weak voice, "Don't worry, I won't do anything wrong ever." So now, after getting the gun, Aldrich aimed it at the sleeping Harold. Seeing this, Pastula literally trembled. Terrified, he asked, "What are you doing?" Aldrich cut him off mid-sentence and said, "We'll die if we don't get food. Do you want food or not?" Pastula realized that Aldrich might be intending to kill Harold to satisfy his hunger. Before he could move to stop him, Aldrich fired, But his target wasn't actually Harold. It was a seagull sitting on the edge of the raft. The sound of the gunshot woke Harold up too. He immediately realized that they had all just hunted a seagull together. Ignoring everyone, he jumped straight into the water to retrieve the dead bird for the raft. Fighting the waves, he reached the bird, but just as Harold grabbed the seagull, a large shark appeared in front of him. Pastula and Aldrich spotted the shark. Aldrich shouted, "Chief, hurry up! There's a shark behind you!" Clutching the seagull, Harold tried desperately to swim back to the raft. On one side was their hunger, and on the other was death. Aldrich tried to shoot the shark that was rapidly approaching Harold, but the slider of his gun jammed. The shark was now very close to Harold, but before the shark could get Harold in its grip, Aldrich and Pastula somehow managed to pull him back onto the raft. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. After starving for many days, Aldrich, Pastula, and Harold satisfied their hunger, at least a little, with the seagull's meat. By then, 20 days had passed fighting death and hunger. Harold lay in deep sleep inside this boat. Suddenly, he woke up. He saw that, overcome by hunger and thirst, both Aldrich and Pastula had fallen into a deep sleep, even though Harold had told them to take turns keeping watch. Seeing this, Harold got furious. He woke the two of them up and started scolding them severely, but Aldrich didn't like Harold shouting at all. He got angry and said, "The wind hasn't been blowing for the last 2 days. The raft is stuck right there. What's the point of keeping watch in such a situation?" Harold's anger grew even more at Aldrich's behavior. A heated argument broke out between the two. Aldrich blamed Harold, saying, "We are stuck in this vast ocean because of you, because you flew the plane in the wrong direction. And now, no one knows where we are. Your map and all your calculations of direction are based solely on your guesswork." Aldrich shouted angrily at Harold, adding, "You have lost us in the middle of this vast ocean. You did this. We are all paying the price for your mistake." Hearing this, Harold remembered that day when they were inside the plane and had lost their way. Actually, on that day while Harold was flying the plane, due to intense heat and exhaustion, he had indeed dozed off for a while. That was Harold's biggest mistake, because they had gone far past the point where they were supposed to change the plane's direction, and by the time Harold turned their plane around, it was already too late. Because the plane's fuel had run out, they had to make an emergency landing. With a heart full of sorrow, Harold explained everything to Pastula and Aldrich. Regret was clearly written on his face. He told Aldrich and Pastula, "You guys were right. I'm a pilot who lost his own ship. And along with my own, I've put your lives at risk too. I don't know how I'll ever pay for this mistake. Please forgive me if you can." Seeing Harold's remorse, Aldrich and Pastula's anger cooled down completely. Then Aldrich looked at the map and said, "Maybe this map isn't entirely accurate, but this map is our last hope for reaching the island." Because by then, the wind had completely stopped as well. As a result, their raft wasn't moving at all. Seeing this, Pastula said, "Looks like we have to make our own wind now." Just then, an idea struck Harold. He cut off the tops of his shoes and made 2 paddles. Using the soles of the shoes as paddles, they slowly began to propel their raft forward. 30 days passed like this, and suffering from continuous hunger and thirst, the 3 of them had not an ounce of strength left in their bodies. They were lying there, looking like corpses. But that evening, thick black clouds suddenly gathered in the sky. Maybe it would rain now, so hope for survival returned to the eyes of the 3 of them, and within moments, pouring rain began. This rain quenched their thirst after many days. They even collected a little water for the next few days. And just then, the weather started to change. Harold looked up because by then, the clouds were drifting in a different direction. All of this seemed like trouble to him. He said, "I don't like this because the clouds are moving in the opposite direction. Maybe a terrible storm is coming." And before they could understand anything, the wind started blowing even harder. Harold shouted, "Get ready, friends! The storm is here!" Harold threw a life jacket towards Aldrich and said, "Catch this, remember? You don't know how to swim." Right then, a massive wave rose in the water, and as it crashed down, it flipped the entire boat over. All 3 of them fell into the ocean, and they tried desperately to handle themselves in that raging storm. In this chaos, Pastula disappeared from their sight. When Harold looked around, he couldn't find him anywhere. Panicked, he shouted his name, but there was no answer. Only huge waves could be seen all around. After calling for Pastula for a long time, when Aldrich looked back, he saw that Pastula was holding on to the other side of their raft. Aldrich breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing this. So then, Everyone flipped the raft back over and climbed onto it again. The next day, these three were lying inside the raft, looking just like dead bodies. Because by then, their bodies had dried up, their lips were cracked, and only despair could be seen on their faces. Pastula asked, "If one of us dies first, what will happen to his body?" Harold smiled faintly and said, "Aldrich, you always loved to eat, didn't you? If I die before you, you can eat my liver or heart." Harold also said, "If we somehow survive this danger, I'll get medals for both of you. But even if I survive, while I might be able to give you medals, I might face a court-martial." Hearing this, Aldrich and Pastula said, "Chief, we don't think you've done anything for which you should be court-martialed." Hearing this, Harold's eyes filled with tears of joy because his two colleagues had kept their faith in him even in this difficult moment. So now Aldrich said, "Man makes so many decisions to make his life beautiful, but the real decisions of human life are always in the hands of the Almighty. So we don't need to have any regrets now." Then Pastula somehow gathered some courage and sat up. He said, "If this is happening by the will of the Almighty, then it means He wants us to finish our journey. We can't give up like this after coming so far. The Creator has kept us alive to fight." Hearing these words from Pastula, Harold and Aldrich's courage returned. The three of them composed themselves and, while lying down, started using their hands as paddles so that their raft could move forward, even just a little. But within a few minutes, they were panting. Their hands went numb, and slowly, their morale started breaking again. Exhausted, they lay down on the raft once more, and Harold noticed that Pastula hadn't moved at all for a long time. He called him 2 or 3 times, but got no answer. Harold felt that perhaps Pastula was no longer alive. He slowly signaled to Aldrich, trying to tell him about this. Realizing this, the two of them felt immense pain. But right then, Pastula blinked his eyes. Seeing this, Harold and Aldrich were overjoyed. A short while later, Aldrich suddenly spotted green vegetation a little distance away. He immediately informed Harold about it. Hearing this, Harold and Pastula looked in that direction. Seeing the scene ahead, they all went crazy with joy. Harold shouted, "We did it, boys! We defeated death!" Actually, an island was visible in front of them, named Puka Puka Island. So, somehow, with great difficulty, they crossed the remaining path and reached the shore of that island. They couldn't believe their own eyes that they were still alive. They had traveled about 1,000 miles across the vast ocean for nearly 34 days. And finally, returning from the jaws of death, they stepped onto the soil. Harold was later honored with the Navy Cross for his bravery, which is considered one of America's highest military awards. But after this incident, he never flew a plane again. On the other hand, Pastula's health deteriorated so much that he couldn't continue his service in the Navy. He passed away in 1986, and according to his last wish, after being cremated, his ashes were scattered in the ocean, exactly at that spot where they had fought the greatest battle between life and death. We later learned that Aldrich continued his duty as a radio man in the Navy, and he built his future career within the Navy. Harold, Pastula, and Aldrich proved that no matter how great the danger, a human being doesn't lose until they decide to give up. Actually, there are phases in life when we feel like the road has completely ended, but a tiny glimmer of hope gives us the strength to move forward, like a light in the darkness. So, friends, I hope you enjoyed this story very much, and I will personally give you just one suggestion. Definitely keep faith in yourself. Stay well. Keep your family well. Sending love to everyone. I'm signing off. Good night.